So first up, data center design. I guess the obvious place to start would be the pandemic must have had some kind of impact on, building data centers, the pipeline, and maybe obviously the supply chain is fairly global. So, what have you seen in terms of that impact?
Yeah, thanks. I mean, it's certainly been an interesting year, that's for sure. Something that is a bit unforeseen, of course, and something you can't forecast. I think generally our market, our segment, the data center market, has been very healthy during the pandemic. That we've seen an increase in demand for cloud services, and therefore knock-on increase in demand for data centers and data center construction. But like you said, that doesn't come without its challenges, of course, in the year of a pandemic. If you take construction, for example, you touched on that, Phil. During the first sort of lockdown that happened in most countries, I think the construction sites were asked to close. So this poses obvious challenges when you're trying to build data centers. So whilst the demand was spiking, when you listen to people like Noel Walsh, who says the demand for their Teams platform, or the CEO of Zoom talking about the demand for their platform, the acceleration they had during this pandemic at the beginning was exponential, and so the demand was great. But when you can't build data centers, you can spin up some demand with the capacity that you have, but as we saw, there was a demand for new construction. Now, the problem with that we experienced was, firstly, the closing of construction sites and the ability to construct. But then as that started to open up again, we had the social distancing challenges that we had to meet on site. So whilst we might therefore be able to open up construction again halfway through the year, something like that, we had to think about social distancing. So we couldn't get as many people, as many services on site.
And in terms, without wishing to make it sound too dramatic, but that supply chain issue, is there a danger that certain pieces of plant for the facilities are in short supply now, and maybe we'll run out of them, or is the manufacturing back up to speed? Is that a concern?
One thing we did to sort of mitigate this early on was just really work very closely with our customers. For sure, there were supply chain issues for everybody around the world because of the pandemic. We found working very closely with your customers on current projects and really being open and transparent about everything really helped us, and I think it helped the industry as well. And I also think some of the customers were understandable of this, of course, as well. Some of the hyperscalers, when we would work very closely with Microsoft, for example, just to be open together and put a solution in place together.
And is there any prospect whatsoever that sort of there'll be a data center capacity shortage because of this, or have things opened enough, fast enough that, assuming we don't have a third wave or something catastrophic happen, if everything does carry on the sort of trajectory back to normal, there'll be enough data center capacity existing and built to cope with the digital demand?
Well, it's a good question, because this is the demand is global, of course. Unless we focus on a specific country, but the demand is global. The growth is exponential. If you were in DCD event last week and you heard Penny Jones speak from CBRE, one thing that she did say this year, in the flap markets at least, there's been more take up than there has been supply. So when that happens, of course, we are eating into current supply. If you continue to eat into current supply, you're going to have a shortage. So this year there has been a bit of a slowdown, let's say, in the amount of supply to the market compared to last year. But Penny is forecasting that next year we're going to accelerate and catch up, and the next 2 years I think it's going to be over 800 megawatts of supply into flap markets alone. That should get us back under in a position where we have the right amount of supply coupled with the demand and the absorption rates. But we are seeing a lot of growth, as you said, Phil, in new markets, in not only in Europe, but also we're seeing Middle East and Africa, South America, new markets in Asia like Indonesia and Vietnam. Possibly, as you say, can it put a strain on the supply chain? Well, what we're seeing in turn is probably a little bit of a, not a slowdown, but we're seeing less construction in other segments. You think about oil and gas, or you think about hotels, or if you think about retail outlets, whatever it might be. You can imagine during this pandemic, some segments and some markets have suffered more as a result. We've had demand in digital services, hotels, of course, and retail outlets, they've had their demand has gone down. So they're constructing less. So we can shift some supply. The whole world can shift some supply. This is not just about Schneider, from other markets to the data center. So there is some capacity in the manufacturing chain that can be utilized to support growth in the data center. So I don't foresee necessarily us running out of data center space to support the digital demand. I think it'll be maybe a couple of things. It'll be planned appropriately. You look at the hyperscale providers, they're very good at planning this, I would say. But also current data centers can be upgraded, they can be redesigned, they can be modernized to account for possibly higher capacity, higher densities per rack, more compute per rack to cater for some of this demand as well. So we have a two-pronged approach to managing this demand, but I don't foresee us running out.